Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the custom material webinar. My name is Nick, and I'll be doing the presentation with you today. Just like all of our previous webinars, everybody will be on mute, but if you do happen to have any questions at any point during our class, please feel free to go ahead and type that into the questions and answers section of the Zoom panel. And at the end of the class, I will go through and answer any questions that may have come up. Also, at the end of the class, I will be sending out an email that's going to contain a document that covers everything that we're going to be looking at in today's class. And should you happen to have any questions while going over that document, you can contact our support department, and they'll be happy to help you out with any questions you may have. You can reach them from Monday to Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and you can do that through either phone or email. Again, today's class is on custom materials, and we're essentially going to be going through some detailed information about creating custom materials that can be used or applied to your Envisioneer model. We're going to be looking at how to source a material. We're also going to be looking at how to edit the material, and then we're going to be looking at adjusting the material's properties to apply it to your actual model. So first, let's talk about sourcing of the material. So depending on what you're going to be using the material for, this will help dictate where you can source that file from. If you are looking for a specific material from a manufacturer, then you can find the image or texture on their website, or by searching online for a texture that closely matches what you're trying to replicate. Using a search engine like Google and entering in key phrases like seamless texture will help narrow down the search. If you're trying to match an existing finish, you can take a picture of the finish with your camera and then save the image to a computer so that it can be edited. When sourcing your textures, you will want them to be in either a JPEG or PNG format, unless you're creating a transparent image. Then you should be saving your textures in a BMP or a PNG format. Once you have found the material you want to use, you can then save the material to the textures folder of Envisioneer. And that will be actually located under, if you go to your C drive, actually, depending on where you are storing your files, it could be under your C drive and then under Program Data and Cadsoft and Envisioneer 16. You will see the textures folder. If you are not seeing program data when you go to your C drive, it's probably because you don't have it turned on. Or you don't have hidden files and folders turned on. To see that, you have to go to View, Options, View, and then make sure you have the Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives turned on, and then you'll see Program Data. So once that's activated, you'll see Program Data, and then under Program Data, you will see Cadsoft, and then Envisioneer 16, and then your textures folder. So let's source a material. So let's just minimize that for a second. We're going to open up Google here, and I'm just going to source the material. I'm going to type in gray board and batten siding, and we're actually going to say seamless. Now, when I say seamless texture, what I'm trying to find is a texture that, when mapped, will repeat correctly. So a lot of seamless textures are going to be created for you already, and you can just download them and use them. Some of them you may need to actually edit. So I like to type in as detailed of an information as I can find, and then I usually click on the images option. And this will bring up all the different styles that are available on the internet. And let's just grab one of these. I'm going to grab this guy right here. So this looks like a pretty nice texture. Now, even though I typed in seamless, I can already tell that it isn't seamless. So when I actually click on this and I look at it, this part of the texture, if I was to map it all the way to this side, would not line up properly. So even though this is a nice looking material, I'm going to want to try and edit it a little bit. So first we need to try and save the image. So we're going to right click and we're going to say save as. And so this one's not going to work. So we're going to go back. We need to find an actual JPEG image. So let's find an actual JPEG image. And we'll use, let's try, my normal material doesn't seem to be showing up here. So let me try this guy here. So we'll select this one. And then we'll go right click and save image as. And there we go. We can save that as a JPEG. And I'm just going to save this to that file location. Actually, I'm just going to save it to the desktop for right now. And we're just going to call this gray board and batten. So once I have that saved as a JPEG, I'm just going to say save. And now I'm just going to minimize all of this. And now I need to edit that material. So when you apply a material in Envisioneer, it copies across the face of the receiving object. So as you can see, I already have a gray material applied here, but this is more of a cement board siding where it's got indents and it's kind of tongue and groove together. I want the board and batten style. So I want to apply that to this design. So right now, this texture is mapping across the entire face. And if I look at the actual material, so I go to appearance, and I take a look at it, what it's actually doing is it's taking this material, and I can see it here, and it's mapping it. So there's actually only 4 boards here, but it's mapping those 4 boards repeatedly across, and it's stretching it vertically up and down to fill in that actual space. So it's very important that you make the material look seamless when creating it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that material that we just sourced, and we're going to go in, and I'm just going to type in paint. Now, if you have a photo editing program like Microsoft's, or sorry, with Photoshop, you can actually open it up in Photoshop, and you'll have a bit more control over how to edit the texture, but everybody should have paint. So this way is just as easy. You just simply import the material and then you just crop out the area that you want. So we're going to use paint for this class, and I'm just going to go up and I'm going to say file, and I'm going to open up a actual view here. So I'm going to go open, and I'm just going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to select the gray board and batten, and I'm going to say open. So I can now see that texture. But again, if I try to repeat this, it's going to look incorrect. So if I just do a select all here, just so you can see, and if I said copy, and I said, let's go in and say paste. If I tried to paste this, and let's just increase the size of the canvas here. So let's resize the canvas. And we'll go in and say vertically, horizontally, let's go 1200. We'll say okay. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to increase the size of this canvas here. There we go. And we're going to go in and we're going to select this area here. So if I copied this and I said copy, and then I said paste, if I tried to map this to the other side, it's not going to look correct. So what we need to do is we need to edit it so that it's going to repeat correctly. So I'm just going to delete that part out, and I'm just going to undo back to here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a selection, and I'm just going to hit select, and I'm going to grab on this side of the batten, and I'm going to stretch it all the way over, and I'm going to stop on this side of the batten. So what I'm doing is I'm including this batten, but removing this batten. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say copy, and then I'm just going to start a new drawing. So I'm just going to go File, New. Do I want to save the changes here? Nope, don't save. And we're just going to go in, we're going to say paste. I'm going to crop this down so that it just sits exactly where I want that to be. And then I'm going to save this as that material. So I'm going to go up and say File, Save As, and I want this to be a JPEG. And then we're going to save this into the textures folder. So we're going to go back to our C drive. Going to go to C drive, program data, Cadsoft, Envisioneer 16, textures. And then I'm just going to give this a name of webinar board and batten. And then I'm just going to say save. So I've now created that texture, and I've created a seamless texture by editing out the portions that I don't want. And then I can just simply select close. So now that I have actually created that texture, I can now apply it to my actual wall. Now, before I do that though, what I do want to make a comment on is there are textures that will need to be transparent. And if you want a texture to be transparent, it needs to be in a bitmap format, and it needs to have an actual color code applied to it. So if I select this door as an example, and I go into the properties, so right now this door is using an image. So if I go to leaf, it's using just a flat panel door. But if I go to appearance, it's using a picture of the door. And if I click on the picture of the door, it is literally just an image file of an ODL door that's being mapped to the face of the door itself. But if I scroll through this list, you're going to see that there's a couple of different options at the bottom. And if I double click on those, what you're going to see here is a door that has this bright magenta color in the actual window area. This color, when the make magenta color transparent is selected, will make that area completely invisible. So it will make it transparent so that you can see through it. Now, a door is just an example of this. There are other applications where you can use this magenta color to get rid of certain areas. Other examples are going to be like using photo boards. You're going to find that some photo boards will have a magenta color on them. And essentially, again, all it is, if you go to, and if I just go into here, and we'll go back into textures, and let's just go in and we're going to select a type. And this is just going to take a second here to load all of the different textures in here, because we do have PNGs, bitmaps, and JPEGs in the catalog or in the textures folder. And then once this is done sorting, we can see a BMP file here. And let's go down to, there's going to be all of my Benjamin Moore colors. Just trying to find an actual door here. What is the actual texture? We are using 684. There we go. Sorry, I should have done that to start with. 684, so that should be at the very top here. 684, we'll use this guy, and then we're just going to open this in Paint so you can see it. So we're going to go and say open with and Paint. So you're going to see that door and then that magenta color. Now this area here, which we're using as the magenta color, if I use my little eyedropper tool and I pull that up, it is using an actual color code. And that actual color code is 255, 0, 255 on the RGB scale. So again, red, green, blue, 255, 0, 255, and then you make that area completely transparent. I say cancel to all of that, and that's how you can make an actual texture be transparent as well. So now we're going to adjust our material properties after we get that material added into our design. So once you have edited the texture file and saved it to the textures folder, you can now create a new texture within Envisioneer. So in Envisioneer, you will be able to give the material a name and adjust the properties to reflect how it should be rendered. Adjusting these variables will help in achieving a more photorealistic material. So in Envisioneer, we're going to go up, we're going to select File, Catalogs, Library Manager. And then in the Library Manager, once that loads up, we're going to select Libraries. I'm just going to wait for that to load. And then under Libraries, we're going to select Materials. Under materials, we can see that it's now giving us a list of all the materials that are available in Envisioneer. And they are all going to be grouped by actual types. So you see brick, cabinetry, and it's going to be in alphabetical order. We're going to assign this to be in a folder called wood panels. So I'm just going to scroll right down to wood panels, or you can type in wood panel and it will find it. So once we find wood panels, I'm going to scroll to the bottom and I'm going to add in a new material. So I'm going to go to the very bottom, right click, add material. So now that we've got a new material, we're going to go up and we're going to change the name. And I'm just going to call this gray. And we're going to call it webinar so I can find it easier later. And then we're going to change the actual texture. So you can create new materials based on colors. And again, you can just select the color option and you have the RGB values. So you can actually type in specific RGB values. If you're looking to create specific paint colors, this is one way of doing it. We're using an actual texture. So we're going to select texture and then we're going to click on the little picture, which is going to be our browse button. And then we're going to find our new texture. So we're going to go into select, and it should bring us into the materials library. And we're just going to go in, and I believe I named it webinar, and I said webinar, board and batten, and I'm going to say open. So I can now see that new texture is now added in to the panel here. Now, once I have that loaded into here, I need to start to define certain parameters. So I'm looking at this and I can see that I have 1, 2, 3 boards, and then I have 1, 2, 3 battens. So I need to determine what I want each thickness of this to be. So if I'm going to assume that the battens are going to be 1.5 inches, I'm going to say that the panels are probably going to be 6 inches. So we'll just say we'll do 8 inches altogether. We're going to do 8, 16, 32. So I'm going to say that this should be 32. Actually, my math is off there. So 8. Yeah, no, 32. So we're going to say that I want the actual width to be 32 inches. Now the height, because I'm going to be adding this to a wall, I can make the height, whatever the tallest wall I usually make, I can make that the total height. So I usually have walls up to 10 feet. So I'm going to say I want the height to be 10 feet, and I'm going to unlock the constraint. If I typed in 32 in here, it would adjust the height as well. So I don't want the height to adjust. I just want the width to adjust. And I'm just going to type in 32 inches. This will tile, again, vertically and horizontally as a texture for us. Since this is a texture that doesn't have any transparency, I don't need to have the make magenta color transparent checked. So I can leave that unselected through here. What I do want to take advantage of is the texture intensity. Now, texture intensity controls the brightness and the contrast of the actual texture. And the values range from 0.00 all the way up to 2. I typically leave mine at 0.8 and I see how it affects the scene. If I start to notice that the color of the texture is dispersing across the scene, I will lower the texture intensity down, and I would probably go down to like a 0.5 or a 0.4. But again, this is going to be something that as you're trying out the textures, you may need to come back in and make an adjustment to it. But 0.8 usually works out to be exactly where I would want that texture's intensity to be. And then I'm just going to simply say, okay. Next, we have a bump option. Now, if you're going to be adding in a texture that has raised edges or wrinkles, you may want to take advantage of the bump feature. This will help give the texture the appearance of depth when it is rendered. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. Now, one way is to take the texture that you're using and apply it as a bump texture. So right now, I'm just going to select this texture. And I'm going to say, this is the wrong one. So we're going to select the webinar one that we just brought in. And we're going to say webinar board and batten. We're going to say, OK. And then we're going to make sure it's the exact same size. So we're going to make sure, again, that that is 32 inches. What this will do is it will allow me to now apply a bump scale, and I can use this little slider here or scale option to bump up the intensity of that bump feature. There is another way of adding in a bump map, and it is what we call an actual normal image. Now, this texture won't have it, but if I go in here and I select the select option, and I'm just going to type in normal so you can see what I am referring to. No file found. So there should be some normal images. So here's an example of a normal image. So this texture has, it's a tile texture and it has depth to it. So it's got some concave to it. It's got some etching in it. So what we would actually apply is what we call a normal image. And this is a exact inverse of the original texture. Depending on where you're getting your textures from, some textures will have the normals already created. And then you can actually just use those. So you would download not only the texture, but also the normal image, and then you would apply both. And then what this does is it basically just finds the highlights and the lowlights, and it applies that same principle, but using a normal image. And it will give that depth to the actual texture itself. So I'm going to click cancel on that, and I'm going to click cancel there because I don't want to change anything there. The next thing we see is emissive. Now, the emissive option allows you to control how much light the texture gives off. This is a siding material, so it's obviously not going to cast any light. So we're going to make sure that our emissive is set to 0. Then we have opacity. So the opacity option controls how transparent the texture is going to be. And again, this is a siding material, so it's not going to have any transparency. So it's going to be completely opaque. And then we have the actual opacity set to dull, because it's not going to be a glossy material. It's going to be like a rough looking material. So I'm going to say dull. Then there's specular. Now the specular option controls how shiny a texture is going to be. And again, we don't really want this to be shiny. It is a exterior siding made of wood. So I'm going to have not only the specular color set to 0, but I'm also going to have it set to dull as well. And then the reflection option allows you to control how reflective a texture is going to be. And again, we don't want any kind of reflection off of the siding. So we're going to make sure that it is set to 0. And we can adjust the scale, again, to be sharp or blurred. But since there's really nothing here, we don't need to worry too much about that. Then we have index of refraction. Now that's what the IOR stands for right here, is index of refraction. This describes the way light bends when crossing the material's surface. A value of 1 means that the light will not change any kind of direction. Selecting a material from the drop box, example, air, crystal, glass, I believe there's plexiglass, there's a bunch of different options from within here. It will then populate the index of refraction's value in that edit box. So if I go to water, you're going to see that it updates the actual index of refraction. There are scales online that you can look for. So you can type in index of refraction and it will actually give you the ability to search for materials, and it will tell you what the index of refraction is for that material. And then you can actually go to custom and you can manually type in whatever index of refraction you want to use. And this will again just help with the realism of your actual textures when they're being rendered. The last option in here is the Fresnel option. And when this is enabled, the reflection strength will become dependent on the viewing angle of the actual surface. So some materials in nature, like glass, reflect light in this manner. Just a quick note that the Fresnel effect will depend on the index of refraction as well. We're then going to click on the Information tab. Now, on the Information tab, this is where you can control certain settings like the material's usage. This will help you when searching for the actual texture. So if you're adding in your own textures, make sure you're coming to the info page and you're saying, I want to be able to apply this so that it is a wood texture. So this material usage is set to wood, and you can apply an assembly to it if you want to calculate quantities on it. I'm not going to do that for here. And if I want to take advantage of adding in a manufacturer, I can apply a manufacturer to this texture as well. I'm just going to simply say OK. And I now have a new texture added to my catalog. And I'm just going to say OK to that. Once I have that texture created, I'm going to let the catalog save. And then once the catalog saves, I can use my materials paintbrush to apply this to my actual walls. So I can go up to my materials paintbrush. So the material paintbrush will only be available in a 3D view. So make sure you're in a 3D view. Select your materials paintbrush. The catalog will then populate. It's going to use the last texture that we were editing. So it's going to find that gray webinar that we created. And I'm just going to select the apply to all similar. I want to apply this material to all of the walls in my drawing or exterior side. So I'm going to select the board and batten, and I'm just going to left click on the actual texture. And I can now see that that texture is added in. Now, if I scroll down and I take a look, I can see, well, I made it 10 feet tall, but the top to the bottom, there is a bit of a difference in the color. So what I want to do there is I want to select all similar, right click, properties, and in the appearance, under exterior surface, I can see the texture that I'm using, and I can see mapping. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select mapping, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, well, I want to use the position and I want to raise or lower the position of this. So I'm going to lower this down, and I'm just going to give this down option a couple of clicks, and I'm just going to say OK, and then OK. And it's now going to move that texture down, and it's going to get rid of that line to make it look more realistic. I can also move the texture left and right using those same arrow keys. Now, if I pull the camera back here for a second, and I want to go in and create a rendering of this, I would just go up to View, Render 3D Real View. And because I applied the bump mapping to it, it should give me that sense of depth to the actual texture itself. So if I just create a quick rendering here, it will help create the illusion that there is actual depth to the board and batten itself. And we're doing a lower quality rendering here, so it's not going to be as accurate, but the higher the quality, the better the renderings will look. And I'm just going to say cancel or close to that. And that covers everything that I wanted to discuss in today's class. So I'm just going to go over a quick review. I do see that there is a question already up, so I'm going to go ahead and answer that in just a moment. But if you do happen to have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and enter those in. So in today's class, we have learned how to add custom materials to the catalog. We learned how to source the material from the internet by searching online for an image, or by going to the actual manufacturer's website. You can also use your camera to take a picture of a texture or a material and use that as well. Once you have the image, you will need to adjust it to make sure that it maps correctly within your design. And you can use Photoshop or Paint to edit your actual textures. Once the texture is added to Envisioneer, you can adjust the properties of the texture to achieve photorealistic quality renderings. So let's open up the questions. So there doesn't seem to be any questions at this time. I think this was just correcting my math. So they're saying 24 inches. I think that's what that was. So what we can do here is, again, I'm just going to pause here for a moment just to see if there's any other questions. And we can go in just to see and go into properties. And appearance, and we can go into the actual texture. And did I make it 28? I did. So we can make that 2 feet. And we'll just say 2 feet. And we'll say OK. And then with the other texture, we'll do the same thing. We'll say OK, and OK, and OK. And it will adjust the actual size of the texture. So even if you do make a mistake, you can go back and adjust it and make it look correct. So I'll just pause here for just another moment to see if there's any other questions or any follow-up questions. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, I will be sending out an email that contains a document that covers everything that we've talked about. And should you happen to have any questions while going over that document, you can contact our support department. They'll be happy to help you out with any questions you might have. So it doesn't appear to be any questions. So I do want to thank everybody for attending today. I do look forward to speaking with you all again very soon. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.